Hello and welcome to the Cougar Proud Podcast. This is Greg Woods, WSU beat writer for the Spokesman Review, joined as always by Jamey of CougFan.com. And folks, I don't even know, I do know where to start, but there is so much that we're going to have to talk about in this one. And I feel like there's no better way to start this one than figuring out where we were when we found out that Jimmy Rogers was headed to Iowa State. He is going there on a 6-year deal apparently, and the Cougars are back in the same spot that they were around this time a year ago, without a head coach in place and getting ready for a bowl game. So first of all, tell me where you were, what you were doing when you saw the news roll in.
I was at a Mexican restaurant in Seattle, about to go to a concert with some friends for my birthday.
That was on your birthday.
Yeah, this all happened on my birthday. And there had been that tweet earlier in the day about, there's like 10 candidates, like an Iowa State page had tweeted. And I didn't give it a second thought. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, first off, they're not going to hire a 6-6 coach. Second off, come on, not going to happen. And then suddenly I'm sitting at the table with a couple of my friends and my brother like gasps. And I'm like, what? And he turns me the phone and it's the Pete Thamel notification about Rogers leaving. And I'm just like, my jaw just drops. I wasn't under some impression he was going to be here for 50 years. I wasn't maybe even under the impression he was going to be here for 5 years. But I felt pretty confident that after a 6-6 season, in which he lost to Oregon State, that there wasn't going to be.
He was going to be able to leave.
At least
not to a place like that.
Right. Like, so I was shocked. Obviously, you see the why just in terms of what's come out with his relationship with the athletic director and just kind of that whole weird situation. But yeah, I was pretty floored.
I was laying in bed watching an NBA game. I was watching Lakers Celtics, and they had a shot of LeBron on the bench. He wasn't playing in this game, and behind him was Drew Timme, who is, I think, on a 2-way deal with the Lakers now. So I remember sending a text to Theo, who's now our Gonzaga writer. Everybody knows him. He had this job 2 people before me. And I just sent him a text about seeing Timme in the background, and we're kind of just joking about that for a second. And then all of a sudden he texts me like, "I'm so sorry." I was like, "What? Like, what do you mean?" He's like, "You didn't see the Pete Thamel tweet?" And I checked it out. I was like, oh my God. And at that point I had to jump into action and confirm it and get all that written up. So were you able to, like, did somebody else at your outlet like put that up first of all, or like what was your workflow after that?
I just texted my bosses. I'm like, guys, like, I'm out tonight.
Yeah.
Like, and I had told them days ago, like, this was, part of, all right, I had a few things going on for my birthday weekend, blah, blah, blah. There's, it's not like there's going to be any breaking news. Lo and behold. So I just, so and then I was busy a lot of Saturday too, so I was able to kind of get the, the coaching hot board up, and then, since then been back in the, but yeah, it was just kind of
the way I've explained it to people, not that people care about, what we're doing or how this impacts us, but the way I've explained it to people that are outside of like sports or journalism is that like for people like you and I, there is no single event that could happen that would give us more to do than what has just taken place over the weekend.
Yeah. Like, athletic director leaving? No. Okay, the Pac-12 imploding was pretty damn.
Okay, yeah, I guess that
but
was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other than that, a transfer, John Mateer transferring, Cam Ward transferring, and not just a coach, not Kyle Smith leaving, but a football coach,
right?
At this juncture, I mean, it's the same. And here's the funny thing: is the workload for us. This is still the light area of it.
Yeah.
When it really gets crazy is after they hire a coach, and then once the portal opens, and then you've got all the new coaches they're going to be hiring, and all the players that are going to be coming and going. The one saving grace about this year rather than last year is the portal isn't open until January, and they have so many guys graduating, there just physically can't be as many portal entries.
Right.
Like, they have 29 guys who are, or was it 29, 25, however many it was, that are graduating anyways. So, you don't have to, the Tucker Larges of the world and the Caleb Francels, there's this is inconsequential for them outside of their last game, but
Yeah.
that's the key difference. And just that the portal is so much later, which I also think works in Washington State's favor.
Yeah.
Um,
I also kind of, and well, I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit. I also don't really think that will have the impact that people are making it out to be, because like the way I see it is that like yeah, like it opens a little later, but the players that decide to enter are going to enter no matter when it like officially opens. You know what I mean? There's already 5 guys that have announced their plans to go into the portal. So
my counter to that would be is obviously there's going to be the guys who they just follow Rodgers. Like that's just and
yeah,
those guys are non-negotiable. But you think about some of the guys who maybe left last season because the portal was open, and by the time Rodgers got in, it was too far gone. Whether you want to talk about the David Gustas of the world, etc. I think by the time if they can get a coaching staff in, within the next few days to week, you've got time to try and coerce those guys back because they aren't officially in the portal. I remember when David Riley got hired, kind of he talked to Miles Rice, obviously, and Miles really liked what he had to say, and they were very kind of interested in that. But at that point, it was just so far down the road that you weren't coming back from it. And I think a lot of that is what happened with Gusta last year too. Obviously, the money played a part, but they were so far down the road of engaging with other schools, there just wasn't a lot of
but that's
turnaround at
but,
that point.
but that's going on anyway. It doesn't matter when the portal actually opens. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure the guys that
But
have
guys
gone in.
can't commit to a place until the portal opens. They can't visit anywhere until the portal opens. So any of these guys who are in the portal right now, like an Anthony Polano, I'm sure is going to Iowa State. And obviously, this doesn't necessarily affect the Kenny Worthies of the world. But what if you hire a coach who ends up going with the air raid? Last year, Jackson Potter's probably already gone by then.
Yeah.
Whereas theoretically, if that's what happens, and I think there's a better chance that they can, woo some guys back in, guys that, are kind of on the fence, guys that maybe just want to test the portal waters. Whereas, again, last year, when Jake Dickert was, first off, they had already lost a ton of guys by then. There was already a bunch of guys in the portal by the time Jake Dickert left, whereas there was only 3 when Rodgers left. And you're first the bowl games earlier, that helps. A few days earlier helps. But you get a new staff in, and those guys are not too far gone down the road. Is the point I'm making. It's not like they can go and be taking other visits. I mean, how many guys were already committed elsewhere by the time Rodgers took over last year? And maybe they have in their minds where they think they want to go, but they can't commit anywhere publicly because they're not publicly in the portal.
Yeah. That's
Um,
fair.
and, and and so technically anything now, any contact, any coach that calls a player that plans on entering the portal is by rule tampering. Now, does that matter?
Yeah,
No.
exactly. Like I don't.
But
We're so far past that.
it is also, there is also like the kid's name isn't like a Jovan Clark, for example. Let's use him as a perfect example. A coach can't go into the transfer portal right now and see his name. Now, if they have a familiarity with recruiting in the past, whether that's Rodgers or someone else, that's a different story. But any guy who would have been recruited or pursued because their name pops up in the portal, that doesn't happen until January. So I just think it's a little bit more of a buffer, a little bit more flexibility with there can be guys that they can coerce back, and that other guys will probably feel like some of the guys who maybe would have entered the portal right like yesterday feel like, okay, we can wait a little bit, see how the coaching staff unfolds. The portal doesn't even open until early January. If that's not what we want, we don't like the new coach, there is no new coach, whatever. At that stage, they can say, okay, this isn't what we want. Now we can enter the portal. Whereas, it gives the players a little bit more patience in that way.
For sure. Before we get into who the candidates we have in mind and all that type of thing, let's just put a bow on the Jimmy Rogers era. We hardly knew him here. Less than a full calendar year in at Washington State. I almost, because like people have asked me, man, like what is it like to cover Jimmy? Da da da. Like I'm just trying to think of like what his legacy is going to be, just like at WSU and like our memories of covering him. Um, he was just like, I don't know. He comes off kind of grumpy. I think he warmed up to us eventually in the media. I think, I don't know.
He was
What do
just
you?
kind of there. Like,
He was, yeah, and this is like part of the deal is that like I don't know. And this is a topic for later on, but I don't think he was like that. I think they like what they need is someone that's like fun to work with and like get people engaged and opening their wallets and things like that. And I'm sure he did some of that, but I just like his personality was just kind of like he was just if he was like a flavor of ice cream, I think he would just be vanilla. You know
Yeah,
what I
I
mean?
mean, he
Like I
was
just like sorry, go ahead.
right, and I don't doubt that I do think he's a good football coach. I mean, I
Yeah,
think you
yeah.
saw signs of, and that's kind of where it's different from this year to last year. Like, I still am not convinced that Jake Dickert's going to be successful at Wake Forest. I know they went 8-4 this year. Again, look at that schedule. Look
Yeah.
at what they were playing against. You got to be who's on your schedule. They were below Wazoo in the ESPN FBI. I think Rogers is going to be very successful at Iowa State. I do think he's a very good coach. I think that market is kind of maybe best suits him. Obviously, this has been his, as he said, his dream job forever. Again,
I,
Iowa State is a dream job. Is a interesting.
Can we?
Um,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We have to before we get off topic of that. We have to talk about just a little bit of like how like tied at the hip these two entities
it's
were for a while.
a
Like
little bizarre.
I've never heard like because I got up at the crack of dawn yesterday to watch his introductory news conference at Iowa State, and like one of the things he said that ended up getting a lot of traction on Twitter is that like before every I couldn't tell if he meant either WSU or South Dakota State, but before every game he would Pollard, the AD at Iowa State, would text him good luck. Like that's I've never
I've
maybe
never
that
heard of
happens
that.
maybe that
First
happens
off, I
more
don't
than we
even.
sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
That doesn't feel like it's actually like legal within college football, like the tampering rules and
I
so
can't
on. But
I can't tell if that's like if there would be a rule against that or it's just like two friends, texting between each other.
it's also just weird though. Like
Oh
it's
yeah, yeah.
it's strange. Like that is a strange thing to me. Um, I saw someone say, the first qualification for any new head coach should be, are you secretly, best friends with another athletic director
That's
that's at a different
I don't
that's at a different school or something. It was just it was a what's I don't think Pollard has done him any favors with what he has kind of detailed. I think it just makes it, and here's the thing too of I think the quote that keeps circulating is the I'm as loyal as it gets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here's the thing. If Jimmy Rogers had come here 1 year, come to Washington State 1 year, hadn't said any of that, this was the dream job, whatever. Like, I think what again is what you have seen with the way the last two football coaches have left versus the way that Kyle Smith left. There isn't, from the Washington State fan base, it's not just automatic bitter you left us. It's just the nature in which these have happened. And the last two football head coaches and their departures have been so beyond bizarre between the motorcycle picture and the airport picture, and obviously everything Dickert did, screaming about loyalty and this and that from
well
this
here's what I would
relationship
say.
that
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Here's okay. I think Jimmy actually I think it made perfect sense for him to talk about his loyalty in that when he first got here, because he had been in South Dakota State for 1,002 years. He
sure,
might have been aspiring to Iowa State at some point, but like, what kind of crazy dominoes had to fall for this to open up when it did? You know what I mean? Like, so
sure.
I actually do believe him when he says he didn't intend to leave here so quickly. By the same token, it's not smart to come in here. Like, whoever they hire next should not come in here and talk about loyalty,
Well,
because
I think the first question is going to be either from you or I, or whoever, is the last two coaches have preached loyalty and have worn that as a badge of honor right up until they were no longer loyal. What's your message on that? Like, why should Coug fans believe this time around that when the new head coach says he's loyal, this, that, or the other? So I just think again, yeah, no, it's and the problem I have with it was never my I didn't intend to leave. You always obviously knew. He knew
yeah,
that if Iowa State opened up this year, he was going to leave or next year. So to me, it's like no one forced you to leave. You didn't have to leave. I get the dream
well,
job, etc. But like, if it was never his intention to leave, then he wouldn't have left. And
uh,
now, no, I don't think he
I think what
believed he
he
was leaving.
meant, I think like the the said like end of that sentence is didn't intend to leave as soon as he did.
Well, and then he should have said
He
that.
should have said that. No, I totally agree. I'm with you. I'm with
Uh,
you.
But I think but no, you just look at again the weird way the Dickert thing transpired, and then just this weird relationship him and the Iowa State AD seem to have, and then you look at Kyle Smith and be like, yeah, the guy left for like his dream job and to get help for his son. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, I also just think that like even with the way that Rogers left, like, with all the circumstances, I also think that if he had just like left out the part about loyalty, this would have still gone over a little better with the Wazoo fan base. Um,
yeah, it was just I think when you come in and that's like your first message, and you mention that fans are tired of hearing that because obviously fans
yeah,
got sick of
yeah,
hearing that from Dickert only for him to leave. It makes you it rings your words very hollow when 11 months later you do leave. Now, like
yeah.
that's just the thing. And I think the other tough part too is and this is probably some of the just kind of the Washington State fans having to come to terms with a lot of the new reality, but it's not like Dickert and Rogers went to Georgia and Ohio State. Like they went to what have traditionally been two of the worst Power Four jobs.
Iowa State.
And before Matt Campbell got there,
Yeah, but that was like 10 years ago.
but I said that's what I said traditionally, like not
Uh,
currently.
well,
I'm not
okay.
saying they're currently the two worst jobs, but like
Don't
if
make me
you look
defend.
at like
Hey, don't make me defend Iowa State. I'm not ready to defend Iowa State. Believe me. But
no,
I
just
agree.
the point I'm making though is before Matt Campbell, I mean put in this Matt Campbell is the first head coach at Iowa State to have a winning record since Earl Bruce from 1973 to 1978. Like this has not been a good football program over the years. That's the point I'm making. Now, recently, obviously Campbell completely turned that program around, and credit him for doing that. But I think that's just when you think over the history of college football, it's you're not thinking of Iowa State and Wake Forest in particularly high regard, and I think it's in the mind of Washington State fans, and I think fairly in the mind of Washington State fans is again we're talking pure historics. Washington State has been historically the better program. Now, obviously, that doesn't affect the now. Those teams are in Power Four conferences. Washington State is not. But I think that's a hard thing to wrap your head around when these two programs, if you look at the history of college football, have been a step below
I
Washington
think
State versus.
I think that applies much stronger fashion to Wake Forest and Iowa State. Because no one like with Wake Forest, people think of that place as a basketball school, and rightfully so. Like I think people are totally right to feel like Jake took. I think that move is much closer to a lateral move than from here to Iowa State. Like
I
again,
would no, I would agree, and that's what I'm saying. Like in the current positions they're in, like I'm not arguing that in
yeah,
2025 Iowa State's a better program than Washington State. I'm not saying otherwise at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
I'm saying in the grand scheme of college football, in the history of it, and I think that's why it's like you start looking like wow, like this is a new reality. Whereas again, 20 years ago, no one's leaving Washington State for Iowa State. I say that as Jim Walden actually did the same exact thing in the 70s, but that's beside the point, or the 80s. But I do
Yeah.
think it's just an interesting. I think it's an interesting added fuel to the fire of these are two programs that are not considered to be the quote unquote high end cream of the crop. You're losing them to Ohio State, to Georgia. They're towards again if you're looking at history towards the bottom of the barrel of the Power Four leagues.
Well, at any rate, he really wanted this job. Like from what I heard from someone with the program that told me, like Washington State could have gone like 5-7, 4-8, and he still would have been in consideration for the job just because of like how like this Rogers and Jamie Pollard are. Like it is just
I do
completely
wonder what
apart
would have happened if
if they
if
missed
they
the
lose
bowl.
to Oregon State.
If they go
Yeah,
5-7,
twice. Yeah,
that man, that is. I mean, I don't
because
think
that
that would
would have
have
been a
ever.
really hard sell.
Well, even I mean, I think it's like if they lost to Idaho, they were much closer to losing to Idaho than they were at home to
Yeah,
Oregon State.
also true. Also
Um,
true.
like how would that change things? It's crazy. Like I was even thinking the other day about like what if I'm blanking on the Vandal player's name who recovered the Angel Johnson fumble near the goal
Was it
line.
McLean?
I don't even remember. But like he
I
he
think it was
could
Matthias McLean.
he everybody saw that and like was like wow you could have just run that in for a touchdown. What if he runs that in for a touchdown? Is he still going to Iowa State if they lose? You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's all kind of water under the bridge,
It,
but some of those things are
it's the
just
same thing. Yeah, we talked about with Dickert last year. If
yeah, yeah,
Dean Janikowski doesn't connect from 50 plus,
exactly. Like is he still here? Like are we even sitting here talking about this right now? Like it's totally nuts.
mm-hmm.
Um, So anyway, that's all kind of.
Donovan Parham recovered it, by the way. Matthias
Okay,
McLean
okay.
forced it.
If there's one thing Jamie is gonna do, it's gonna look something up about
Yep.
something something minute detail. So anyway, yeah, but best of luck to Jimmy. I know, I don't expect any Wazoo fans to wish him well, just based on the way he left and the circumstances around it. But I think we are in agreement that he'll do a good job there, and he is a good coach, and that's the end of an era here. It was less than a full calendar year, which is just totally
It wasn't
nuts.
even an error. It was a blip.
I was gonna say era is not even really accurate. That's just like what people
No.
say. Yeah, I mean, so anyway, he is out of here, and now our attention turns to the big story in town right now, which is like who are they gonna hire as the next head coach? And I want to believe we have something of the same list in mind. But why don't you give me like one or two, and then I'll give you one or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think the name that has all the talking points behind it right now is Rick Neuheisel. I have my doubts. I just, I think and wonder kind of just, I think there's upside and downside. The guy was well regarded in his past as a great recruiter, as a salesman, as all these things. The concern is it's been 15 years since he's been on a sideline, 14 years.
Yeah.
It's a different college football. Could he adapt and adjust to that? And I think the idea would be, all right, he would be the head coach. You have Jerry Neuheisel as the OC and kind of the coach in waiting, the way they did with Dick and Tony Bennett. But again, and this is the argument, Dick Bennett had been out of coaching for like 2 years. I mean, again, we're talking Rick Neuheisel's last game as a UCLA head coach was before Mike Leach coached at Washington State. It was Barack Obama's first term. Like, it's
Yeah.
been a long time, and I could get behind, or I could understand maybe as like a GM or like some kind of like that. But I do wonder if he has been out of the game too long now to be a college head coach.
The question, I think the only way, because I'm with you, I think he would be better suited as like a GM or something in that vein. The question that I think applies here and applies to this entire discussion, no matter who we think is a candidate, is who is going to get the fans most excited to not only come to games but to donate. And
And that's the
do
thing
we
with
think that Neuheisel would move the needle in that way?
it depends on the demographic. I think for the fans in their 50s and 60s, like the older fan base, yes, they remember him, they know him, they remember him going to a Rose Bowl with Washington, they remember some of the recruiting and some of the great Colorado teams he had. I think for the fan base that's younger, no, because a lot of them won't have heard of him. I mean, the fact of the matter is you're getting to a point where incoming college freshmen are going to be 3 years old when Neuheisel last coach.
Yeah.
Even people like our age were in high school the last time he coached, and we remember more of the back end of his UCLA tenure than the 2001 Rose Bowl team at Washington. So I think now the counter to that is who's got the money is the people more in the 50 to 60
I was
demographic,
gonna
not so
say
much
like
the 30 year
that.
olds.
Yeah.
So I do think that there is absolutely that thing to consider of if you are concerned about him getting as many donations and so on, then there is that marketing value to that demographic of the fan base. I think the counter to that is also is that prioritizing, are you prioritizing that over being able to actually coach on the football field? And it's hard to say if he's going to be able to do that. Again, we are talking a very different era of college football
Yeah.
that he was last a part of. Now he's stayed close to the game. He's been on CBS forever. He still has connections here and there. But even within that, you look at his last coaching staff. I mean, like Clark Lee was a position coach, and you've got plenty of guys who really aren't feasible candidates. Does he still have enough connections, either between himself or between Jerry, to really build a staff? I think that's another thing that you have to wonder.
I also wonder if you do. By the way, John Canzano is giving Neuheisel like a 25% chance to get this job, which like as far as odds go, that's got to be pretty strong. The other thing that I wanted to point out was that like if they want to make it a package deal with not only Rick but also his son Jerry, who took over as the interim OC at UCLA, like is there like a succession plan? Like maybe in a year or two, does Jerry take? Like I don't know. I also like am a little bit tempted to believe that like he kind of took. I'm talking about Jerry, kind of took the nation by storm with like this, like he jumps in and they beat Penn State by a million and all this. But like the last few games of UCLA, like they were terrible the last few games. Like they had this like weird stretch of like, oh my God, UCLA is back now that they, made some changes. But it actually didn't like end in the same fashion. So
No, they won those 3 games in a row, right?
yeah,
They beat Penn State, they beat Michigan State, they beat Maryland, and then their last 4 games they lose by 57, 38, 34, 19, and they score what 27, 37, 51, 61 total points in the last 5 games.
wow,
So,
yeah,
they had that 3 games, the 2 games against Penn State and Michigan State, they score 80 points. And then by the way, Penn State, who was ended up being a 6-6 team, Michigan State, who was terrible, and then they beat Maryland, who was also terrible, and
yeah,
they wind up over their last 6 games barely scoring 2 touchdowns a game, and that's the other thing with Jerry Neuheisel. He's been a position coach the last 4 years, and it's not quarterbacks, it's receivers and it's tight ends. I mean, that is
yeah,
a tough transition to being an offensive coordinator. Like that is a lot of those, it can be done, but a lot of OCs are quarterbacks coaches. And that's not to
yeah,
say Jerry Neuheisel couldn't do that. He did play quarterback, but it's I think back to when the Dick and Tony Bennett scenario came in. At that point, um, Tony had been an assistant at Wisconsin. He had experience. He was kind of a young up and comer that had shown some success. He had been a Wisconsin assistant and so on. And even then, that could have backfired. But he was also Tony Bennett was an assistant on some really good Wisconsin teams. I mean, we're talking teams, under Dick that went. He was an assistant on a team that went to the Final Four and then
mm-hmm.
made the tournament a few times. So it's quite different, I think, in terms of both of those.
Yeah. I I don't know. I don't think it's the same. Let me move on to another one here. I think this is also the big one. Kind of actually, I guess there's two, but the one that I want to bring up is Johnny Nansen is kind of making some waves. Well, not himself, but just his name. I mean, you would know this better than me probably, but he's a Wazoo alum. He's had a million jobs, mostly on the West Coast between UCLA and USC and Idaho State and Idaho and Utah, like all these different teams, and very familiar with the region. Has never been a head coach, which I think was the other point that I wanted to make about Jerry. Is I don't think that like they're really in any position to be making like a roll of the dice type of hire. Like I think they can't like I don't know. So that's the thing with the Jerry Neuheisel thing, but the thing with Nansen is that he had never been a head coach, but I think if you were ever to hire someone that has never been a head coach, you would feel better or you would feel best about him, just because of the experience, the guys on that staff that he might be able to bring over if he were to get the job. There's also like the subplot of Jeff Banks and the monkey situation, which like I had almost forgotten about it until right before we got on here, and I was like, oh my god. So that is just an incredible subplot there. But I think he would. I mean, if I had to like come up with a guess in terms of I don't know this for sure, but I think he would. I think he would be a good coach here, and I think he has to be on the list here.
To me, he right now to me, and I'm actually writing a little bit about this, so I don't want to give too much away. But let me pause. I'm not writing about any inside information. I'm writing about why I think he would be a good candidate. I don't know,
Breaking
but
news.
yeah, to me, he's the guy that really, really catches my eye. He's a Wazoo alum, so there's that aspect.
Mm.
He's been on the West Coast pretty much his whole career, outside of a 1-year GA stint at Louisville, and then now a couple years here at Texas. He's been extremely well regarded as a coordinator and as a coach. I mean, I remember when Jed Fish left for Washington, Arizona players wanted Nansen hired as the head coach, and they obviously went with Brent Brennan, but there were a lot of players who were really vocal in keeping Nansen on as the head man before he ended up going to Texas. Actually, I think he had gone to Texas, and then they thought about maybe bringing him in. It has been long known that he's a great recruiter and is absolutely almost automatic when it comes to recruiting Polynesian players, which has traditionally produced huge success at Washington State. Not to mention, you've got a number of them on the roster right now. So you hire a guy like Nansen, you probably feel pretty good about retaining some of those players, especially in the trenches. It just, and then I think there's enough connections throughout his career, whether you look at the wide receiver coach at Texas right now, Chris Jackson, former Washington State wide receiver. Would he be an offensive coordinator possibility? You look at who he has been with at USC or at UCLA or even at Washington. You look at guys like, what would he be able to get someone like Kenichi Udeze, who played at USC and is now at FAU? Could you get him into the fold? Is there a scenario where Everett Thompson would stay and maybe be a D-line coach and help with that connection? Same question with Mike Upati. Jason McIndoe, another former Wazoo player, is an assistant at Texas. So it would kind of give you an ability to build a staff that has some Wazoo ties, but not also be abandoning qualified coaches. These are not just hiring a guy to hire a guy because he's a Wazoo alum. I know Rob Akey's name has been thrown out, and he's not a Wazoo alum, but at this point, Rob Akey probably not a true head coaching candidate. However, Nansen coached with Akey at Idaho. Could you bring, for again to connect with some of the older fans, as a special teams coach or as a senior assistant or something like that?
Yeah.
Not to mention, again, you talk about the older fan base. Remember Nansen from the days of the Palouse Posse. So, to me, there's a lot of things that, in my opinion, would work in his favor, and that would make him a very viable candidate to be the head coach. Yeah. And to me, a guy that I think should be getting pretty considerable consideration just because of what he brings to the table.
The part that we can't ignore is they have to make some sort of effort to connect with the older fan base and unlock some of that money, especially on the west side. Like, that's what makes Neuheisel a pretty compelling candidate. And it's also kind of what you mentioned. Like, if they can have somebody on staff, whether it's the head coach or somebody else, that has the ability to kind of have some name recognition and can bring some of those resources back into the program, I think they have to do something along those lines. Speaking of Wazoo alums, can we I want to talk about the Luke Falk thing for a second. I don't think I'm particularly qualified to talk about this because you've been here a million years. You watched him play. First off, I have nothing against Luke Falk. Okay, so I don't support him being the head coach here. I don't think that would be a smart idea. But before I even say anything, let me just say I think he's an awesome guy. Last year when I did the story about the Boise State game from 2017, where they come back and then Helinski leads the comeback, when I texted a bunch of these players and coaches that were a part of that Wazoo team, Luke Falk was the first person to get back to me. He is just a great guy. Last year at the Holiday Bowl, he came and said hi to Theo and I in the press box in San Diego. Nothing but good things to say about Luke Falk. You can't make him the head coach here.
I love Luke. Luke was the quarterback for 3 of my 5 years in college. He's a great guy. I think he was a great quarterback. I think if Luke wants to get back into coaching and wants to be a quarterback's coach or a quality control coach, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But I don't. You can't make a guy as dedicated as alumni as he is, with 1 year of coaching experience as a quarterback's coach at a D3 school or D2 school, can't be the head coach of an FBS football team.
No.
And especially, and this has always been one of my concerns with anything like this, is what if it doesn't work out and then you have to fire Luke Falk? It was my same concern with the Mariners making Dan Wilson their manager. If it doesn't work out, and so far it has, are you going to have to fire Dan Wilson? Or if Edgar Martinez doesn't work out as a hitting coach? So I think if Luke wants to eventually get to that point, there's a ladder, there's a kind of a coaching steps that he has to take. And if they hire whoever they hire wants to be the quarterback coach, I think that'd be great. I think that could really work. But he has to take, I think, the proper steps to being a legitimate head coaching candidate.
Yeah, I mean, and I obviously understand he's a beloved figure and rightfully so in all this, but if he had put up the numbers and the accomplishments he did in a different uniform, like Oregon State, for example, you would look at his resume and be like, "There's no chance. Like, what are we talking about
Right.
here?"
Right.
Again, I don't fault anybody for getting excited about that. I think there will be a spot for him on the staff, for whoever ends up being the head coach. But I think if you are a Kook alum or a fan, you want the best for the program. Like, it's kind of a non-starter in my opinion.
I agree.
The other candidate that I wanted to bring up that I feel like has gone a little bit understated in terms of just like his name floating around there, Kirby Moore, the OC at Missouri. There's a lot to his candidacy. One, he's from Prosser, Washington, which I didn't even know there was a town called Prosser, Washington until about a few hours ago. It's Central Washington, apparently. So he's from here. I think his wife or someone in his family is like from the same area. He's been the OC at Mizzou, like I said. He played at Boise State, obviously. Like all kinds of connections to the West Coast. Was at Fresno State, I think, before Mizzou. And I think the selling point with him, there are downsides. The selling point with him would he would kind of reintegrate this offensive identity that I think the fans were mad about losing with the Jimmy Rogers, well, I would say era, the Jimmy Rogers season here. Like I think like there was a subsection of the fans who, again, rightfully so, would rather have lost some of these games like 60-59 than like 10-7 to Oregon State.
Right.
You see
right.
what I'm saying? Because like then it's like, hey, we're not even watching the same type of offense that we had grown to love. And I get it. Like these teams can change with the coaching staff, and that happens all the time. But I think this is one of the best things about him is that I think it would generate a lot of excitement and kind of get back to the style of football that this program has been kind of, kind of known for,
Right. So, but I think the only other guy to even
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would say, the guy who always still is getting mentioned is Brent Vigen, but I think the complication there is still just the fact that he has been committed to finishing the season with his team. If Montana State loses Saturday, that's a different discussion. But the longer they keep winning, the less viable that becomes because there has to be some urgency to get a head coach in. And I will say this, if we don't know a coach by the weekend and Montana State wins, start to wonder if maybe there's an agreement in place. They just said, yeah, you can coach it out the season. So who knows? It's all pretty messy.
There was just to give fans a little bit of context on that situation if it does unfold. When I was in school way back in the day at Kansas State, they in 2018 they hired Chris Kleiman as the head coach, and at the time he was the head coach at North Dakota State. And I believe they made the hire around this time, like mid-December. But at the time, NDSU was same deal. They were in the middle of the FCS playoffs, and they had an agreement in place, like, hey, you're the head coach here, but finish out the season, and then you can get to work after that. It's a different world now, with the advent of the portal and how important it is to get people on board with retain as many guys as possible. I don't think it works the same way. The other name that people have kind of floated around here that I think that like is probably a non-starter is Jason Eck at New Mexico.
I don't think there's any. I don't think he's leaving.
I don't think so either. I think his career trajectory is taking him to a power forward job next. In all likelihood, Wisconsin, if that one were to come to fruition. This might be. Again, nothing against WSU. This might be a better job right now for him, at least. Just like with the way that he's allowed to kind of be himself there and be kind of weird and funny and all this. Like, I think that's a better job, at least for him. The only thing I could possibly see where it might be able to work out is if you just kind of hire him with the understanding that he might be leaving in a year or two and get him on like a crazy buyout. I'm talking like 7.
Yeah, I think the other thing is for him is if he wants to take that next step, and I know the Wisconsin job has always been floated for when Fickle goes. It's not like they wouldn't hire him from New Mexico, I think is the point. For him, you've built this team. You are probably going to be the front runner for the Mountain West next year. You have a good chance at winning the league. Is it worth it for him to go start anew again?
Yeah.
And again, we're not talking about jumping to a Power 4 job. Like, I just don't think for Eck, especially with that extension, I don't think it is worth it to try and build back up another program when if you go win 10, 11 games in New Mexico next year, which I think he's got a good chance of doing, you're going to be a hot commodity to go pretty much wherever you want.
Well, and I don't think Washington State is like enough. It is probably a step up. I don't think it's enough of a step up for him to just to leave for
Exactly.
what would be 2 years max.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think there's much chance of that at all. What they what they share, it's crazy because like if things had unfolded a little differently around this time last year, and the New Mexico job doesn't unfold on the timeline it did, maybe he's here right now. Like
Yeah.
I
I think
think
there's
that would have been a smart hire.
yeah. No, I think in a different world. I think in a different world. But
What do we
um
what's your take on trying to keep Jesse Bobbitt here as the current interim but potential head coach?
I mean, I think you'd be running into the same issue in a year or two, especially if obviously if he succeeds. Um, I think it would help with continuity. I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think there is reason to believe that it would help you with some continuity, and you make Jalen Bibbs the DC, and who knows, but I'd be interested. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world, but it obviously is a huge risk because again, he's only been a FBS D coordinator for 1 year. He's only been a D coordinator period for 3 years, and either it completely crashes and burns, or he has a couple good seasons and he's gone anyway. So you'd be repeating the same cycle, I think, in a couple years. Now, granted, you can't not hire a guy because of that, but I think it'd be a little risky in terms of the fact that he just does not have a ton of experience. Period.
Yeah, and I also think that him and Rogers are like tied at the hip anyway.
Yeah.
Like he's gonna coach the bowl game and then become the DC at Iowa State is what people seem to think, and
Right.
that's what I would predict as well. So yeah, he's a great communicator, a great leader. Like anytime he came over to talk to us after like a fall camp practice or just a regular practice, I was looking forward to that. He was a fantastic interview. I think a lot of the guys I think that's honestly like part of the reason why they were so good on defense this year is that like even when they had a million injuries, like the guys were so fired up to play for him that they ended up just like not falling off when they had what would have been like a catastrophic run of injuries for any other team. Okay, do you have any other names you want to throw out there?
That's all I got for now.
Really? Okay. There's people have
I mean, I didn't. I mean, let me rephrase that. I think there's a million names you could go over time, but I think those are the ones that kind of, I would say, the top of my list, or I think the most viable candidates at the moment.
Here's the other I think reality that you have to if you're Betsy Cantwell and or John Harlow, what you have to kind of work with in mind when it comes to the search is that next year they're going to be playing like their home games are going to be some combination of like Texas State, Fresno State, Utah State, Boise State, whatever. Like there's more structure in there, and I think fans will be more excited to come to games against those kinds of teams. But it's not going to draw in people naturally the way home games against USC and Oregon and regular Pac-12 teams would have. So not only do you have to have someone that energizes the fan base and gets these alumni to open their wallets, you also have to get someone that sells tickets to games because it's not going to happen naturally with this the new crop of teams that they're going to be playing games against. So that I think that's something you have to think about too, is that someone that gets the fan base excited. Because honestly, if it's just like a whatever kind of hire, like it could get kind of spooky in my opinion.
Right.
Okay, what a couple other ones that are just kind of like just to feel like we covered just for the sake of covering them. People have thrown out Chip Kelly. I don't see much of a chance with that.
No.
Just because like a big reason why he left UCLA was because he just hated the whole NIL situation. And he would just be, running back through that if he came here. What about this? What if they bought out Jim Moore from Colorado State and just got him here?
No, hard pass.
No.
Not after the crap he pulled last year on Twitter. No, thank you.
He wanted this job last year though, like really bad.
Then he accused Wazoo of tampering.
No, I know. I don't expect anybody to be on board with that. Okay. So what do you? Okay, so let's. I think our top candidates are going to end up being, in whatever order: Rick Neuheisel, Johnny Nansen, Kirby Moore? Question mark.
And vegan depending.
Vegan. Yeah, 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 yeah. Do you think? I don't know. What's your take on Moore? Do you think there's much of a chance with that?
I think it could happen. I think again, you'd be running the risk he could bounce, but I mean, I think if there was a chance for a guy to just hang out for essentially ever, it'd be a guy from Prosser, a local guy. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible by any means.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna be keeping a close eye on this. Part of what makes this so fun, just from like a personal perspective, is just like I was telling you before we got on here. Like at all hours of the day, I have a tab open on my computer just of like the Pullman Airport arrivals and departures. It was so funny
Right.
the other day, me and I don't know what to call him, videographer, social media guy, Will from you guys' outlet.
Yeah, from
We
Coug fan.
yeah. We the first day, actually, when Rogers was getting on the plane to go to Ames, which was on Saturday, I believe. Was going to the airport just to get some video of that to see him doing it, and I pull up and there's Will getting out of his car. I'm like, oh, what's up, dude? So over the last couple of days, we've just been texting, and then there was a plane. People have been talking about this plane that came from Oakland, California, on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and we stayed up till like way late on Saturday night because it was supposed to land on Saturday night, but it ended up getting moved to Sunday. And then by the time we make it out there when it's supposed to land on Sunday, it turns out it was probably just the team planning to take home the Nevada basketball team who's going to Reno next. So, um,
Right.
so this is all very. I mean, I know people all want to know who that's going to be, but there's also like a side of this that's kind of fun to cover. Okay, well, I think that's honestly all the candidates that I feel like were gonna come to mind. Um,
Yeah.
okay, let's do this for fun. Gun to your head. Who's the next Cougar football head coach?
Me.
Jamey Vidic, baby.
If you're gonna if you're gonna hold me to it, I'm saying Johnny Nansen, and I am not saying that with any inside information. That's just a gut feel.
Yeah,
So there you go.
it's a little bit boring for me to agree, but I think I will agree. I just think you get so much of the best of both worlds, or I guess multiple worlds with him. I think Neuheisel would be a number two if I just had. Again, this is all just speculation and just kind of talking about it, but yeah, I just think like the connections that he would be able to bring, and the background he has on the West Coast make him a pretty convincing option. There's also a couple like Justin Wilcox or Jonathan Smith from Oregon State / Michigan State. I think would also probably be on their radar at some point to some extent.
Right.
But there's those are the guys. I think that's honestly what we should probably cover the most. There's also a little bit of the basketball team floundering a little bit. They are 3-8. I'm not going to get all into this. I don't think anyone's really here for that. But they are 3. I'm sorry, they're 3-7. They're going to play USC on Sunday, and there's a possibility that they go into this game against Eastern Washington at 3-8 overall. And I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
They're just in a bad spot.
I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I think that kind of does it for this episode. That's kind of what the whole story is just this football coaching search. There's going to be a lot ahead, and we will be all over it. So thank you guys for tuning in. And Jamey, I'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.